Well, I would just like to welcome you all. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. It's lovely to see some of your initials and faces and so on. So again, I just wanted to welcome you to this 5th annual Global Challenges program. And for the ones that might not be overly familiar, if we have any family members or friends in the audience as well. The Global Challenges program so on the one hand, it's the Professional Skills Workshops program, and on the other hand, an undergraduate competition, which is the Global Challenges competition, and the very final that you are here to witness today. We have shortlisted 4 teams for this competition and this program this year. Each team has been mentored by an academic mentor at the university. And throughout the program, a couple of workshops they've attended have been around cultural appreciation of networking and time management skills, project management skills, presentation skills, and also an important workshop on how to actually talk about their experience in the Global Challenges program in job applications and so on, and how to really sell this experience. So in the previous years, as I mentioned, we're now in our 5th year. In the previous years, we've addressed issues and challenges that are topical and contemporary, things like the UK's post-Brexit counter-terrorism strategy, fake news, climate change, and inclusivity. And this year, the big question has been, or it's addressed the truly global challenge of how can we achieve policies that are evidence-informed in a timely and appropriate way to enable more effective responses to global crises. So the program for today is simply, as I mentioned to some of you, I hope, I don't know if anyone else has joined us since I mentioned that, but the program is the following. I am now welcoming and introducing you, which I will also hand over to Professor Karen Gentry, who will do the same. Before as I mentioned, will play the pre-recorded presentations on my computer, which is why we are kindly asking participants and audience to mute themselves and switch off the camera. After the first round of presentations, we'll do a short break and just a comfort break, and before we resume presentation round 2 around 1:25. I'm going to try to be very specific on the timings here. And then we do 2 more presentations, followed by a Q&A session. So during the presentations, if you have any questions or if anything comes up, and that goes for other participants and so on, feel free to use the chat function to type in a question. And if you can't do that, then feel free to ask questions as well by using the raise hand function, and I will try to monitor the chat and so on. However, the Q&A, I will prioritize the panel of judges initially, and then open up questions from the audience. After the Q&A session, we will have another break. So normally we would do a lunch break when we do this in person. This time we have a breakout room for the judges, who will get very little breaks today, but we'll get our money's worth, I suppose, and have them working really hard because they are the only ones, except the mentors and so on, that, well, at least they've read all of the written submissions, which is also one part of the competition. So this final is where the participants or the teams will actually present their findings throughout the program and how they have chosen to address the question and offer their proposals and so on. In addition to that, they have also submitted a 5,000-word written piece and proposal, which the judges have read, and they will be judged afterwards on both their presentation and their written proposal. And after the deliberations, we will resume around 4 p.m. today, British summertime, or 4:05, and present the winners. And after that, we also have, I have asked the participating teams to prepare a little statement if they would like to say something after we have presented the awards. And other than that, I would just like to thank everyone involved in this program for making it run relatively smoothly, despite being everything online this year again. So thank you very much to the participants for, I know that you've done, because I've skimmed through your proposals and watched your videos beforehand to make sure everything's working fine. And I am, as always, very impressed with the work that you've done. I want to thank, of course, all the mentors, Dr. Milka Skripek, Dr. Nick Brook, Stephen Gethins, and Dr. Richard Irvine for their fantastic mentorship for the teams. Also want to thank SEED for and the Career Center for making the skills workshops possible, and also the other presenters, and Professor Catherine Rudy, who's done a online presentation skills workshops for us. Of course, I would like to thank our generous funders, Joyce Eroni and alumnus Matthew Evans. Obviously, without their support, this would not be possible. And of course, I really want to thank our judges, Professor Karen Gentry and Dr. Vicky Ward, and the Student Association President, Dan Marshall. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to mute myself and hand you over to Karen.
Thanks, Ricard, and thank you for all of your hard work on this program and for leading it for so long and making it a continued success. I really love the Global Challenges program in the school. I think it is an excellent way to ask students to reflect upon the knowledge that they gained in their modules and how it can relate to kind of real world applications and issues. And I know that this is an additional kind of piece of work for the students, right? It's something that they choose to take on and add to their studies throughout the year. And I think it's impressive that all of you have done this and that you really think deeply about the question that you've been given, that you've written these reports and you're doing these presentations. And I just love that you found the utility and the value of doing co-curricular activity throughout the year. So thank you for that. And then thank you to the mentors and all of the hard work you've done this year in advising and guiding your student groups and teams. The program wouldn't be a success without you. And so that's all that I'm going to say really, is just that I think this is a really great, excellent centerpiece program within the school that helps us to think in kind of enterprising ways, asking students to stretch their knowledge. And I just hope it continues to be a success. So I look forward to the presentations.
Thank you, Karen. Right, so here goes. Let's try to play the videos. If you just bear with me for a second.
Hello, my name is Leonor and I'm a fourth year studying social anthropology and Arabic.
Hello, I'm Kaz and I study computer science.
Hello, I'm Tom and I study international relations and Arabic.
The question at the centre of this year's Global Challenge programme was, how can we achieve policies that are evidence-informed in a timely and appropriate way to enable more effective responses to global crises? We thought very carefully about the approach we would take tackling this solution. This effect was multiplied by experience of enduring with the rest of the world a global crisis over the course of the project in the form of the ongoing COVID pandemic. Frustratingly, watching ours and other governments flounder to adequately address the issue and witnessing firsthand the rise in animosity, confusion and fear consistently seen online and via other media left us with an unshakable motivation to deliver something we felt had potential to be genuinely effective at combating and hopefully safeguarding against such outcomes in inevitable future global crises.
After analysing this issue, we came to the conclusion that ultimately, effective, timely policy can only be cultivated in democracies that have engaged and informed electorates. A country without this foundation risks empowering leaders who disregard facts in favour of narratives and who place their own ego over the needs of the people they represent.
Any initiative that wants to facilitate the development of evidence-based policy must empower and engage the electorates of democracies. In this proposal, we therefore outline a multifaceted approach to cultivating an engaged and informed electorate in Scotland and beyond.
We decided to approach this from multiple perspectives, as we realised this was the only way of developing a truly effective solution to such a complex issue. We adopted a threefold approach, whereby each different area would overlap and complement the others, which would result in a proposal that cohesively tackled misinformation and a lack of evidence-based policy.
So, our proposal has three goals: to educate, to inform, and to engage. Firstly, we will educate students so they have the skills to critically engage with information they are presented with. Then we will provide individuals with tools and resources so they are better informed about the democratic process, with an emphasis on how this can be done online. Then we will provide young people with the tools that will help them to engage in the democratic process.
These three sections strongly overlap with one another. Inform and educate work together as young people engage with online news media more than any other age group. Inform and engage work together by raising people's awareness of the mechanisms of government. And educate and engage together help to get young people to play a more active role in politics and in policy making.
Misinformation about impactful issues such as climate change is a severe affront to people making informed decisions about who they vote for. To combat the regarding of misinformation as truth, it is imperative to teach young people about its various appearances, the intent of its production, and how information presented to us is significantly consequential in decision making. Education aims to provide students with the skills to critically engage with information they are presented with and evaluate the reliability of news sources. By teaching young people how to detect misinformation, they can consume information effectively, thereby making informed judgments about issues which they can execute at the ballot box.
In this section, I will discuss the motivating issues to educate on misinformation, namely the changing role of news to provide a source of entertainment, a proposed solution being a lesson plan teaching students aged 12 to 15 about misinformation, and the next steps, which focus on expanding the outreach of teaching material to more facilitators as well as furthering the content. How does misinformation negatively impact decisions regarding policy? Misinformation leads people to form false opinions about social issues, such as climate change, thus influencing our decision-making ability. Misinformation is blatantly an affront to democracy, overtly stated by the estimation that the average American adult viewed between 1 and 3 fake news stories on social media in the month leading to the 2016 election. Misinformation becomes particularly problematic in the case of climate change. Often fake news suggests it is not occurring, that humans have not contributed to its causation, and that it does not pose as a threat. How has misinformation become so popular, and where does misinformation most frequently appear? The short answer: in the news. Now, news has taken the form of infotainment, wherein forecasting factual information is traded for attention-grabbing, heart-racing entertainment. Misinformation spreads like wildfire by relying on preconceived ideas and judgment, which is preyed on by infotainment as it prioritizes the ability to instantly entice a viewer. Who consumes misinformation? A 2016 study conducted by the PEW Research Center found that 50% of 18 to 29-year-old Americans and 49% of those aged 30 to 49 turn to online platforms for news. While social media has become a space in which users have access to endless amounts of information, it is largely an unmonitored, uncensored space. Interactions are contained in a liberated space, so it then becomes the user's own responsibility to identify misinformation. It is vital that young people are equipped with the tools to tackle misinformation. Given the growing nature of misinformation on an ever-expanding online platform, how will it be possible to tackle such an infinite problem? Education can give young people the critical thinking skills to analyze whether the information presented to them is accurate, reputable, and supported by evidence. It must start with 12 to 15-year-olds who are at the starting point of an online-driven lifestyle. Our proposed solution is an educational lesson plan pack, which is tailored to the Scottish S1 to S3 groups, chosen as this age group is targeted by the Scottish Government curriculum levels 3 and 4. We intend for this material to be presented in personal, social, health, and economic lessons because it develops the ability to critically engage with material found in everyday social activities. During the expansion of the teaching materials, we continuously liaised with the University of St Andrews Public Engagement Officer, who not only agrees this lesson plan is a valuable resource, but further wishes to showcase it as part of the COP26 lesson series, Explorathon. During the consultation, the officer stated that this material could be used to educate additional groups, such as prisoners, signifying the wide reach of the potential audience of the product. Thus, this demonstrates that the idea to educate young people on misinformation reflects effective application of the material. Our teaching materials were designed in accordance with with teaching points outlined in the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence. The lesson plan targets points from across the curriculum. It specifically aims at the following teaching targets. The first, to manage info responsibly using digital technologies. The second set, to evaluate sources and their intention, acknowledge what techniques may be used to influence their opinions, make informed judgments about information. The third set, to educate how and why the media influences public opinion on topics. Regarding the last set of teaching targets, the educational material focuses on climate change as a case study. The lesson content. While I would love to deliver the full 45-minute lesson, I will instead describe the key themes covered. In the lesson, the young people will be introduced to misinformation, where it appears and why it can be detrimental to our decision making. It offers a series of steps students can follow to evaluate whether a source is presenting them with misinformation or not. A more interactive element follows, where students are presented with statements and move to one side of the room if they consider the statement to be true, the other if false. The majority of examples which appear are about climate change. The highlight of the lesson is a Cluedo-esque game where students must work together in teams to locate the culprit, but this time it is the culprit who has murdered the truth. The person who is spreading this information to your team. The winner is either the misinformer who can successfully convince you that their deceptive story is true, or the rest of the team who identify the misinformer. The lesson concludes with a summary of key comprehension points aimed to leave the students reflecting on how they can employ strategies they have learned to tackle misinformation in the real world. Next steps. Instructions for the lesson plan would be devised to equip other facilitators with the knowledge to run the lesson. We would also expand our educational material to create additional lessons on what leads us to form opinions about the world, how we are led to think in a certain way, and how we can critically engage with this. Ideas for further lessons include media literacy, how to fact check, who you can trust, how to analyze data and infographics, and how algorithms work. University students are encouraged to develop a critical thinking mindset when analyzing information or data. Therefore, as these skills are applied in the university setting, university students could share their skills to help the next generation and further accessibility. We are excited to continue working with the Public Engagement Officer, who has expressed great enthusiasm for this aspect of the project and who has suggested bringing it into schools in the local area as soon as next academic year. Since the programme outlined in this section is not limited to Scotland, these lesson plans can be applied across multiple contexts.
Hello, I'm pleased to be here talking to you about the second main section of our proposal, that being the section discussing our goal to inform. Specifically, the goal for this section of our proposal is to explore how we can cultivate a more informed electorate by providing individuals with tools and resources they can use to better inform themselves about the democratic process and their elected representatives, with a focus on how we can do this in an online context. First, a brief overview of what I want to go through while discussing this section. I want to start by giving some more context to this section, focusing in on what specifically the motivating issues this section of our proposal seeks to address are. Next, an exploration of how we propose these issues can be remedied, including a showcase of prototype versions of these solutions. And finally, a discussion on how these tools and resources can be extended and what the next steps for this aspect of our proposal might be. For this aspect of our proposal, we chose to focus on what can be done specifically to better inform individuals in an online context. Why online? Well, you don't need me to remind you that over the last year or so, more and more of our life has been migrated online. We don't need to look any further than this presentation taking place on Teams online rather than in person, live, as an emblematic example of this. However, even before the pandemic, it was a visible trend that more and more news media is moving online, and more individuals are using that as their chief source to inform themselves of contemporary issues. Furthermore, unsurprisingly, it's the younger generation for whom this is most the case. So it's certainly fair to say the future of media consumption and political discourse lies online. However, the internet may not be fully up to this task. Leo, while discussing the first goal of our proposal, already discussed the issue of misinformation, a prevalent force in online discourse. However, this is not the only shortcoming of the internet as a vehicle for political discourse. We identified 3 further issues endemic to the modern web at odds with the undeniable potential it has as a positive force for building an informed electorate. Firstly, the internet is disorganized and can be overwhelming. The internet is, almost by design, inherently disorganized. With over 1 billion websites in total existing on the internet and approximately 500,000 new websites being created daily, it can be difficult to find valuable information without having to wade through swaths of irrelevant sites, or it can be so overwhelming as to make it difficult to know what exactly it is one should be searching for. Furthermore, search engines are not meritocratic, often rewarding sensationalist, entertainment-focused websites with higher rankings than informative ones. Secondly, shortened attention span. A well-documented consequence of prolonged, consistent daily internet use is a reduced attention span. With regards to staying informed, a short attention span makes it harder for a user to engage with resources not imminently available to them. Thirdly, de-individualization. Research has shown that de-individualization impairs our ability to empathize and reach common ground when having discussions and engaging with arguments. In online media, as well as print, politicians are often de-individualized, reduced just to a name, perhaps a cabinet position, and constituency if relevant. As a result, it's rare for us as consumers of media to be aware of the identities of most of our representatives, save for the most well-known, hampering, as a result, our ability to fully engage with the positions of a majority of our lawmaker representatives. While this is not something easy to overcome with print media, the internet provides technology and infrastructure that can be used to address this and the other two issues discussed in novel, innovative ways. To address these issues, our proposal proposes a small suite of online tools, for which we have also implemented functional prototypes. The first of these tools is a browser add-on, which provides concise information profiles about lawmaking representatives whenever they appear in a body of text online. This add-on looks to address all the issues outlined to some degree. To demonstrate this, we can have a look at a demo of this tool in action. So here I am on an online article with the add-on installed. Our prototype uses information compiled about members of Scottish Parliament. And here you can see in this article, anywhere where the name of a member of Scottish Parliament appears, it's highlighted in high contrast colors. And hovering over one of these names generates this small tab with a brief overview of who this MSP is, their name, their political affiliation, the area they represent, and a brief summary of their role in Scottish politics. Already we're cultivating a far fuller model of who this person is. Furthermore, by providing a concise selection of reputable external resources, we give users an easy jumping off point for exploring more about who this person is. With external links to the MSP's Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia, and official Parliament website page, all accessible literally a single click away, we mitigate the risk of users becoming distracted by other stimuli and combat the possibility of decision paralysis inherent to searching for information online. Our next tool consists of a pair of Facebook and Twitter pages, automatically posting close to real-time updates about votes happening in Parliament, specifically for our prototype, Scottish Parliament. The chief issue being addressed by these pages is the convoluted and disorganized structure of the internet mentioned prior. While the Scottish Parliament does keep a live online record of motions voted on, it's located in a secluded branch of the Parliament website. By transposing this information to a medium like, for example, Twitter or Facebook, the same resources become situated in a far more accessible environment, and users can piggyback off features native to these platforms for a far more valuable experience. For example, notifications can alert users to when a new vote has taken place. Posts from the page can be retweeted on Twitter or shared on Facebook to raise awareness about specific votes. And users can comment or reply to initiate conversations about the votes taking place. Here's an example of what a tweet from the live prototype of this page looks like. It contains key information about the vote, its title, how many votes it was passed or defeated by, and a link to the official Parliament website page containing more information. It also includes a graph generated to visualize the distributions of votes cast by MSPs and their parties. With mature prototypes implemented for both of these resources discussed, we are excited by the potential opportunity to take the next steps to extend these resources to truly global solutions. A key aspect of the solutions we have developed is their extensibility. We've developed prototypes based around Scottish politics. However, these implementations are for the most part agnostic of the specifics of the Parliament they are concerned with. Taking, for example, the browser add-on, it's loaded with a dataset containing information about members of the Scottish Parliament. However, this data can be swapped out for any data in the correct format, i.e. a name paired with the relevant information. For example, this could be data on members of the UK Parliament, data on members of the House of Lords, or data on members of the European Parliament. Hence, these pieces of software really have the potential to reach a fairly mass audience. To take the first steps to achieve this, we've made the source code for these prototypes available publicly on a platform called GitHub, which, to oversimplify a whole software development methodology, effectively is a platform designed to facilitate open source development, whereby individuals anywhere in the world can volunteer to contribute to a software project. For example, volunteers could supply datasets for lawmakers in other countries, or tweak the code behind the automated Twitter and Facebook pages to check the status of votes in other government institutions in other countries. We are excited by the potential opportunity to fully extend these prototypes to cover more and more of the world, potentially by reaching out to computer science departments in universities in other countries, or by recruiting collaborators through other avenues. This concludes everything I want to say to you today about the Inform section of our proposal. I'll now hand you into the capable hands of Tom, who will discuss the third and final goal of our proposal: engage.
On to engage. So our mission here is to cultivate a more engaged electorate, and we're going to do this by creating a resource pack that will support voters in engaging directly in the democratic process. So our structure here is firstly, we're going to talk about the issue and the theory behind it, and then we're going to talk about the proposed solution. And then finally, we're going to talk about the next steps and what happens afterwards, after this presentation. So motivating issues. The relationship between voters and politicians is fracturing. In 2019, just 14% of the British public said that they trusted politicians to tell the truth. This has eroded at the efficacy of government's COVID responses and has arguably delayed and confused government's reactions to other risks and threats. The OECD monitors the loss of public trust in political authorities and argues that governments need to engage with voters to rebuild the trust in these authorities. And so they say that governments need to listen, consult, engage, and explain to citizens. Now, obviously, governments already try to engage voters in policy making. You vote, you can contact your MSP, and you can take part in public consultations. But what we noticed was that there was a gap between opportunities to participate and the public actually doing so. So to even the most politically engaged voters, the policy-making process is complicated and opaque. Information about public consultations, for instance, is buried in the depths of the Scottish Government's website. So of the 3 most recently closed public consultations run by the Scottish Parliament, the one with the most responses had only been responded to by 86 individuals and organisations. And the others had been responded to by 54 and 26. So responses to these are really low. So opportunities for public engagement and the benefits of doing so are a neglected element of our democratic discourse. So there are some schemes to bridge the gap between policymakers and in particular researchers, but we need other schemes to directly engage ordinary voters and particularly young people in the policymaking process. So next we're going to talk about our proposed solution to this. So we propose to create a resource pack that will be published online to boost engagement in consultative political processes in Scotland, with a particular focus on helping young people engage in politics, but with issues such as climate change. So firstly, this resource pack is going to help young people understand how they can contact their MSP. So youth engagement in politics is declining, and this is demonstrated by numerous studies that show that very few young people actually contact their representatives. So giving young people the tools to contact their MSPs and giving them the opportunity to voice their views and concerns strengthens the democratic process and helps them to build transparency and trust in politics. So in order to do this and to tackle this issue, we've created a draft guide that helps to explain the process of contacting your MSP. And this includes a template email that students can use. And so we hope that by providing this resource, students will understand that actually contacting your MSP isn't very daunting and isn't particularly complicated, and it is an essential part of democracy and participating in democracy. Secondly, this resource pack will introduce young people to participating in public consultations. So consultations are actually a particularly impactful way of engaging in politics, as governments are actually reaching out and asking members of the public to provide their views on certain issues and policies and how these policies will impact them and their communities. Additionally, as I've already talked about, many consultations don't get a high rate of responses. Participating in them is a sure way to make sure your views are heard by governments and are taken notice of. So we think that it's incredibly important to get voters, and especially young people, to engage in these processes, and that by doing so, we can improve evidence-based policy making, and we can improve trust in the political system. In effect, by engaging voters in policy making, we can break the vicious cycle of misinformation, distrust, and political opportunism. Additionally, supporting young people to engage with these consultations and in contacting their MSPs can raise the political salience of issues that are relevant to young people. So these are really, really important processes. And so, as you can see, we've also created a draft poster that tries to clarify the public consultation process and encourage young people to participate in these. Thirdly, our resource pack will try to demystify the policy-making process by providing an overview of how laws are made, including information such as who proposes a bill, who sponsors it, and the stages it has to go through before it becomes law. So we're doing this because the policy-making process is so complex and opaque that a lack of understanding in how these things are done and how policy is made is also responsible for young people's lack of engagement in politics. So we're going to also develop a roadmap of how a particular law is made with a case study relating to climate change, because that is an issue that young people are increasingly caring about. And we're going to emphasize the elements of this process that young people can get involved in. So to summarize, we have outlined how we want to create a resource pack that will do three things. Firstly, it will show young people how they can contact their MSPs and encourage them to do so. Next, it will clarify the public consultation process and also encourage young people to participate in these public consultations. And thirdly, it will demystify the process of policy making and show young people how they can get involved in other ways. So the resource pack needs to be further developed. As you can see, we've created some draft guides and draft posters of what to include in this resource pack. But in particular, the section that aims to demystify the policy-making process requires further work. Additionally, and importantly, the resource pack will undergo regular evaluation by asking users to provide feedback after its use, which will ensure that the pack is consistently providing young people with the best tools to support their engagement in politics and in the policy-making process. But we'd also like to stress that these resources are transferable to other governments and other governmental systems. So even though policy-making processes and opportunities for student engagement are different in different systems and different countries, the resource pack can easily be used as a template and guide for the development of similar tools. And if it is successful, we hope that students will be able to engage more in the policy-making process, but importantly, that this kind of guide and this tool and resource will support people of all ages, despite being particularly focused on students.
So, to conclude, we've outlined a portfolio of interconnected resources that work together to empower individuals and equip them with the resources to navigate and participate successfully in the democratic process. We decided to focus on Scottish politics to demonstrate how these solutions can work together to develop a more politically active and knowledgeable voter base.
We outlined a set of solutions that work together to educate, inform, and engage members of the Scottish public. Firstly, we proposed an educational lesson plan pack that develops the ability of secondary school children to critically engage with social media. Next, we proposed the creation of a suite of online tools, including a browser add-on and a Twitter and Facebook page that would inform members of the public about contemporary politics. Finally, we proposed to create a resource pack that will support young people in engaging in political processes. These solutions all work together to cultivate an engaged and informed electorate in Scotland, and offer a wide scope for extension beyond to other democracies around the world.
We hope that you are excited about our proposal as we are, and see that we have demonstrated the collective feasibility of our solutions. We are excited about developing this project further and trying to combat the pressing issue of supporting evidence-based policy making and building trust in the political system. We are grateful to have had this opportunity, and we would like to thank the judges for considering our proposal. Thank you.
All right.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Andrew.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
I
you go,
interrupted
Project.
you. No, it's
You
fine.
go.
You go. No, I'm serious. You go first.
Okay, I'll go.
Fine, I'll go. Sorry about that. Andrew and I haven't been able to meet in person since January, and we've done the entire Global Challenges project remotely. So you'd think we'd have learned not to interrupt each other over Zoom by now. Let's try that again. Here's Andrew. Andrew, I think you're muted.
Hello, I'm Andrew Lane, and I'm from a coastal town on the west coast of California inside the United States of America. I study French and German as a freshman at St. Andrews, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today, or tonight, depending on your time zone.
Hello, my name is Karthik. I'm a first year at St. Andrews studying math and physics. I'm from Chennai, which is a city on the coast in the south of India. And I'm speaking to you right now from Bangalore, which is known as India's tech capital. I decided to participate in the Global Challenges program because after I read the email, I kept thinking about the question of how to make effective policy. It seemed really important. And I tried to tell myself that I don't really have the skills to do this, but I just couldn't give up on trying to answer the big question. So here we are.
And both Karthik and I, we hope you enjoy this upcoming presentation, which will take place briefly. Thank you.
Welcome to our presentation. I'd like to start off with the big question. Here it is. How can we achieve policies that are evidence-informed in a timely and appropriate way to enable more effective responses to global crises? For us, the most important words were evidence-informed, timely, and effective. So we distilled the big question to this. How do we achieve effective, timely, and evidence-informed policies? Notice that we've retained the three main attributes. A policy must be effective, timely, and evidence-informed. So whatever our solution is to this year's Global Challenges program, it must produce effective, timely, and evidence-informed policies. And we've thought long and hard about how to do this, and we're super excited to share with you what we've come up with. Introducing a light policy. A light policy harnesses the power of crowdsourcing to generate novel solutions to global challenges. Here's a sketch of how it works. A policy problem is a real-world problem that you want to solve using government policy. A light policy takes your policy problem and outputs evidence-informed, timely, and effective policy solutions. It's that simple. All you need to do is go to our website and enter a policy problem that you want solutions to. Here's a real-life example of a policy problem. Countries like Iran and North Korea illegally detain Britons and other nationalities in order to give them leverage in bilateral and multilateral negotiations. This is effectively state hostage-taking.
Detained in Iran, a mother of one accused of trying to undermine a government. But is she being used as a political pawn? This is Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's story and her campaign for freedom. In April 2016, Nazanin was detained in Iran whilst on her way home, back to the UK. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison over allegations which she denies of being a spy and plotting to overthrow the Iranian government. And the UK government has called for her immediate release, saying her incarceration has been unjustified and unacceptable. Is Nazanin being held hostage? Yes, if you ask her family and many of those campaigning for her freedom. They claim she is being held in order to force the UK into settling a £400 million dispute with Iran. In the 1970s, the UK sold Iran a load of tanks, but after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which toppled the then leader, the UK refused to deliver the tanks, even though they'd been paid for. Is Nazanin being used as a bargaining chip? The answer is no. If you ask both the UK and Iranian governments, publicly they say it's not to do with the debt. Nazanin says she has been told she won't be released until the payment of the debt. However, the UK government says Iran must release Nazanin and all British nationals being held arbitrarily, and they need to be released unconditionally.
Right now, the UK has had very limited success bringing its citizens back home. What should governments do differently to, first of all, stop the illegal detention and then speed the return of illegally detained citizens? That's the policy problem. Now that you've entered the policy problem on our website, you can tell us what you're looking for in the solution. You may want the solution to be innovative and evidence-informed, for example. Once you've done that, we'll get back to you with a wide range of solutions, all ranked based on how well they display the attributes you selected. I think this policy on demand service is really cool. But how does it work? As I mentioned at the beginning, Alight Policy generates these policy solutions using crowdsourcing. Here's a short video to tell you more about crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing is a term that people have been using a lot lately. Do you know what it means? Crowdsourcing is the process of connecting with large groups of people via the internet who are tapped for their knowledge, expertise, time or resources. This idea of reaching out to the crowd isn't new. Even before crowdsourcing and the internet, we often collaborated with groups of people. Some people helped because they were seeking a reward for their efforts, or sometimes they just wanted to help. Let's go back to 1714. Sailing the seven seas was necessary but really dangerous to navigate. So, the British government held a contest asking people for a solution. John Harrison answered the call. He invented the marine chronometer and was awarded a large cash prize. Sailors used the marine chronometer to determine a ship's longitude with the help from the stars. Let's move forward a bit to 1858. A group of scholars created the first Oxford English Dictionary. It was a huge project and they needed help. So they asked for lots of volunteers to write about different topics according to their expertise, and then they put it all together. The point is, relying on the crowd isn't really a newfangled idea, but it wasn't until we all got connected that crowdsourcing came about, because with the internet, you can reach lots of people very quickly and you can direct and organize their work. Think of it like this. Crowdsourcing is a way of solving problems and producing things by connecting online with people that you otherwise wouldn't know. Anyone can use crowdsourcing: companies, governments, groups, and individuals. They can use it to grow their organizations or support their causes. There are 4 different ways crowdsourcing works. The first enables you to access a large online labor force. You can identify and select workers, or you can just post your work and let the workers find you. The second allows you to ask the crowd to help you find the solution to a problem. A third is for when knowledge exists, but you need help finding and organizing it. The fourth is when you need ideas from the crowd and their opinion and feedback. So, as you can see, there are different ways crowdsourcing works, and there are different things you can do with crowdsourcing.
I think that video explained crowdsourcing really well. For us, crowdsourcing means that we have university students all over the world submit their policy solutions to us on our website. They simply pick a policy problem on the website and use our form to submit a solution to it. Best of all, at Alight Policy, we award prize money to the top solutions. For our first round, which was on the issue of state hostage, we offered £175 prize money in total. That's because providing a good incentive is important for effective crowdsourcing. This helps Alight Policy generate high-quality results. I've talked a bit about how Alight Policy works. Now, Andrew's going to tell you a bit more about why we chose the crowdsourcing approach and why we think university students are best suited for the task.
Now, research shows that crowdsourcing can empower citizens, create legitimacy for the government with the people, and enhance the effectiveness of public services and goods. At times like these, modern times, today's times, when we're faced with global challenges, we can often feel powerless and frustrated with the government's decisions, and rightfully so. But that's where we believe crowdsourcing can help. We believe it can empower people and create legitimacy for the government, which is a big deal because, as we've seen with the coronavirus pandemic, if people no longer trust the government, they're no longer going to adhere by its rules. And so when we presented Alight's policy to politicians, local councillors, and policy think tanks, they understood the importance of the issue and saw the role that Alight could play in improving the relationship between the government and the people, aka its stakeholders. And so that being said, we think Alight's policy can be more than just a national platform. We believe it can harness the global community in order to address what are, after all, global challenges being faced by a newly connected global community. And the first round of Alight's policy showed us just that. We received solutions from university students across the world, and that's just an example of how crowdsourcing brings us all together. But a question comes from this. Why are we limiting participation to university students only? Well, it's because global challenges such as the ones we face today are often challenges because conventional solutions, modern solutions, today's solutions just aren't enough to solve them. And we believe university students have great potential to generate novel solutions because they aren't bound by the conventional, ways of approaching the problem. But they also have crucial research, analytical, and problem-solving skills fresh in their minds, and the youth and zeal and ambition to solve the problems. And what better way to put these skills to use than by tackling some of the most important issues of our times? Since every student has a different background and a different core set of skills, we expect a multitude of different approaches to solving the same problem. And that's exactly what we saw in the first round of Alight's policy. The diversity of policy solutions was incredible. In fact, every policy we received was totally unique in its approach. And it's important to note that students coming up with these policies are not expected to be experienced in the ins and outs of policy making. They're not expected to know how to construct a foolproof, watertight policy yet. The students are there to provide new perspectives and to think of new approaches. And their ideas are meant to be scoured over. The policies we received in our first round showed that students are absolutely capable of generating such policies, and whether or not they will be looked up, well, that's the hope. Now, I just talked about why we're aiming Alight's policy at university students, and Karthik is going to show us who gets to decide the policy problems that are being addressed, maybe one of the most important clarifications of the presentation. Thank you, and over to Karthik.
For each round of Alight Policy, we invite leading academics, policymakers, and politicians to submit what they think are some of the most pressing global challenges. We call these people change enablers. For example, the problem of state hostage that we use for the first round of Alight Policy was submitted to us by an associate fellow of a leading UK policy think tank. We can't reveal her identity, but she's definitely qualified. She has an OBE. Back to you, Andrew.
Okay, now, so far we've talked about who picks the policy problem and who can submit solutions. Now I'm going to talk about how we rank the solutions we receive. Although Karthik and I can manage the logistics of Alight's policy, we don't, unfortunately, have nearly enough background knowledge to be able to rank the best policies by ourselves. Obviously, that would be a disgrace, which is why we're taking advantage of the fantastic community of academics at the University of St. Andrews. We know they're busy, so we tried to make our form as simple as possible. academics can give a student policy a score of 0 to 10 stars on several criteria and leave written feedback if they would like. At the School of International Relations, who took the time to rate the policy submission in the first round of Alight's policy, every academic we contacted agreed to help us, and we're so lucky to have world experts on the topics that we focused on. Now, let's take a look at the winning solution from the first round of Alight's policy. Remember, this solution addressed the problem of state hostage taking, where countries like Iran try to gain leverage in international negotiations by illegally detaining foreigners. It's a horrible, strategic, interesting, and base thing to do. But that's not the issue. The policy problem is, and how do we stop this illegal detention and speed the return of illegally detained citizens? The winning solution was submitted by a student at St. Andrews. Their solution is the Magnitsky Act, which places sanctions on top government officials and their family members. These sanctions include refused entry, assets and bank accounts frozen, and foreign currency restrictions, although this last measure requires international cooperation to achieve. The student argues that conventional sanctions on countries like Iran won't be effective since they could still receive support from powerful revisionist countries such as Russia and China, and this has happened previously in history. The student points out that top officials from countries like Iran often have family or hold assets in the West, and suggests that Western countries employ their intelligence branches to identify such family and assets to place sanctions on. Additionally, limiting the flow of foreign currency to such countries can also be used as leverage because it would damage their economies. Now, here's what our judges thought about the policy. First, we asked them whether the policy solution actually addressed the problem. Next, we asked them whether the solution is innovative. Lastly, we asked them if the solution would be realistic, effective, and credible in real life. Crowdsourcing makes Alight's policy effective, but it's because of the academics who rate these policies that our whole process is evidence-informed. Our first round was great, but we're not stopping there. We have lots of exciting ideas from the topics of our next rounds. For example, the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow would be a fantastic opportunity to solve some real-world policy problems. Here's a summary of Alight's policy, right here. And that's Alight's policy. Before I thank everyone who took part in the policy-making project that was Alight and helped make our project a reality, I have to address the elephants in the room. How exactly do the policies generated by Alight's policy result in more evidence-informed, timely, and effective policies in real life? It's an important question, and here's the answer. We hope that the people who submitted the policy problems, the change enablers, if you will use Alight's policy as an input in the evidence-informed policymaking process. Of course, the policies we generate will need to be refined by actual policymakers, but by providing them with a curated list of the best policies we receive, along with expert academic feedback, we believe these policymakers can generate better policy, especially in the face of global challenges. And that's how Alight's policy helps. Now I can finally thank everyone who took part and helped make this happen. In particular, Dr. Nick Brook, thank you very much for your invaluable guidance in this project. We couldn't have done it without you. And we would also like to thank the unnamed policy problem submitter for being the first one to use our website and get this project started. Thank you both very much. And of course, we thank the organizers and fundraisers of this program as well. Now, you've just heard me talk about Alight's policy, but that's not the only thing we came up here for. We're introducing Alight Explains, and here's Karthik to tell you more about it.
Alight Explains has a very specific purpose. It exists to spread accessible scientific information about global challenges through social media. The post I'm about to show you describes how greenhouse gases cause global warming. Enjoy. while Alight Policy generates and selects evidence-informed policies, Alight Explains tackles the problem of equipping the population with sound knowledge and fighting against conspiracy theories that are especially prevalent during times of crisis. We think the best way to do this is to use logic and science to explain how we know certain things about global challenges, such as climate change, for example. We also think our audience loves to engage with content that's colorful and visually striking. So naturally, Instagram is the perfect social media channel for us. But of course, our goal is to reach as many people as we can. So we'll be on Snapchat, Facebook, and Twitter as well. Social media is great because our posts automatically make their way into people's feeds without them even searching for them, as long as they follow us. And the Alight Explains Instagram page already has 78 followers and counting, with a 45% follow back rate, which means around half of the people we follow us back. We think this rate will improve as we have more posts. And that's Alight Explains. We really hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we look forward to answering your questions live. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you for watching.
I'll suggest. This video introduces the St Andrews Journal of Emergency Science Policy, Suggest. It will explain how we will utilise the existing, varied student and academic body of the University of St Andrews to deliver an academic journal and online publication to produce evidence-based policy in a timely and appropriate manner to deal with global crises. We will explain how our smaller scale focus on local policy is beneficial to this aim, and the structure we have devised for Suggest. This structure is centered around 3 boards, focusing on 3 key issues: public health, climate change, and human injustice. We will explain why we have chosen each of these. Then we will discuss our research, both with stakeholders and our target audience. And finally, we will discuss how this comes together to produce an ambitious project, but one that we have made implementable by having this factor at the heart of our design. We hope you enjoy our presentation. The St Andrews Journal of Emergency Science Policy is a journal, and a think tank, and an online publication. It's quite a few things really, but all with one aim: to provide policies that are evidence-informed in a timely and appropriate way to enable more effective responses to global crises. We're doing this by linking universities, policymakers, and the public. We cannot solve these problems without these 3 being linked: universities for the evidence, policymakers for the policy, and the public to keep policymakers in check. For the university side of things, we're staying close to home. Suggest will be made up of academics and students at the University of St Andrews. Crises are complex and require an interdisciplinary team, so we'll draw on expertise from St Andrews' varied academic body. We're handling the other 2, policymakers and the public, through 2 publications. One, a quarterly academic journal providing detailed evidence-based policy papers ready for implementation, and the other, a website which will present these dense policy papers of the journal in an easy-to-understand format, like short videos, infographics, and stories. We're really proud of this and how it will help hold politicians accountable by making the general public more informed about policy decisions. It will also help introduce some transparency into the policy-making process and allow an increased level of trust between the government and the public. Suggest provides evidence-informed policy in a timely and appropriate manner by linking universities, policymakers, and the public. It will draw from St Andrews' existing body of students and academics to form interdisciplinary teams that will come together to form policy. This policy will be presented in an academic journal and a website, in which the policy will be presented in an easy-to-understand, engaging format.
Global crises don't always need global solutions, because implementing a solution globally and even nationally is nearly impossible to get working for everyone. Remember that link between universities and policymakers? Well, that's extremely complex. And it's nearly impossible for academics to get their research heard when politicians have to deal with a whole nation's worth of issues. That's why we're starting small. Let me tell you a little story about Palm Beach, ballots, and an election loss. During the 2000 election in Florida, Teresa Lepore was trying to design a ballot which could assist the elderly voters in her community. So instead of making the typeface small, she kept the typeface the same size and spread the candidates over both sides of the ballot, as there were a high number of candidates during that election. And though this was a compassionate gesture, it led to so much confusion. 19,000 of those elderly voters that Lepore was trying to help ended up accidentally punching 2 holes instead of one for Pat Buchanan and one for Al Gore. And Pat Buchanan, who was only expecting to win a few hundred votes, won 3,400. In the ensuing debacle, around 22,000 votes for Al Gore were thrown out. Florida fell to Bush, and Bush won the election. This is a classic example of the butterfly effect, where just one small change can have a much larger impact. And we believe we can do the same with Suggest. By making evidence-based policy in our local area, we will not only be able to change the lives of everyday people in and around Fife, but also we can serve it as an example to the rest of the community and to other local authorities. You can implement similar policy, and we can have the same butterfly effect set with policy and be able to make the world a better place.
Because of how hard it is to engage with politics on a national level, Suggest will focus on local policies. This smaller focus will allow us to enact real change, and although not directly making a global difference, we can lead by example and through demonstrating effective local policies spark a butterfly effect, leading to the adoption of similar policy more widely. This fact was reiterated in our discussion with Stephen Gethens. We had the privilege to work with Stephen Gethens, a former member of Parliament for Northeast Fife. We had an in-depth discussion about Brexit and the UK's relationship with the EU, and Stephen's vast experience in Scottish and UK politics allowed us to see into the policymaking system, which helped us craft Suggest's local focus. In addition, Stephen reiterated that the most effective way of handling a global issue is at the local level, emphasizing the interinstitutional level and networking. We incorporate the importance of the interinstitutional level and networking into the structure of our journal.
Let's talk structure. Suggest will be divided into 4 different boards: the head governing board and the boards for public health, climate change, and human injustice. The head governing board will approve policy plans for publication, review applications from academics wishing to join Suggest, and elect one of its own to act as chief officer of Suggest. This board will also manage finances, form additional subboards as they see fit, select the heads of the subboards, and adjust the members of the head governing board and the subboards. The other boards will research their respective issues, seek solutions, draft policy papers, network globally with experts in their respective fields, and advise local authorities.
With our 2 publications, one directed towards academics and one towards the general public, as well as with our local focus, Suggest has the unique potential to be the catalyst for global change by starting small. We have talked at length about Suggest's local focus and how we'll make an impact locally, but what does this look like? Suggest will initially target 3 issues, and we will demonstrate how Suggest, using its local focus, will be able to effectively implement evidence-based policy to make meaningful change.
The Local Government Association showcases many case studies of local authorities coming up with their creative policies to help their local level, such as in North Yorkshire, where the local council created a database of local businesses which helped match locals to a local business, boosting the local economy in the darkest days of the first lockdown. Suggest will be able to expand on this work and help more local authorities. By targeting local authorities instead of focusing on a national level, Suggest can formulate targeted policy and innovative solutions based on the local needs and data in order to find the best solutions for the local area. Other than the head governing board, we've chosen to focus on 3 main topics that we believe to be the areas in which our journal's findings can make the most active changes. The first of the main issues is public health. Unless you've been on Mars the last year, I'm sure you have noticed the troubles which governments have gone through in tackling the coronavirus pandemic. The UK has experienced 128,000 deaths, and over 10,000 of those were in Scotland. Behind each and every one of these numbers is a person who is sadly taken before their time, such as Stephen Stewart, who died at the age of 45, and Thomas Morrow, who died at the age of 53, just mere weeks before he was liable for the vaccine. We have seen policies yo-yo back and forth and have witnessed politics dominate the policy-making process rather than the science. In addition, research done by executive editor Cameron Bessie, as well as observations by Greg Clark, stress the lack of clarity of the research done by SAGE, which contribute to the misinformation and allows politicians to manipulate information and policy. SUGGEST can help solve these transparency issues and hold politicians accountable. SUGGEST will be able to present policies in an easy-to-understand format, allowing for people in the general public to understand the data that is behind each policy, which will help hold politicians accountable by not allowing them to manipulate data, and will boost transparency and the trust in the government.
The second issue SUGGEST will be tackling is human injustice. Let me tell you a little story about Simon Dane. He has been working in Scotland for 7 days a week for the past 15 years. He's been living in Scotland, but due to low-paying jobs, zero contract hours, he and his family still live below the poverty line. His son's routinely bullied at school for his family situation. His wife can't work due to health problems, but because Simon's still employed, she can't receive any benefits. Simon is just one example of the over 1 million Scots living in poverty in Scotland today. And from the vantage point of one of the wealthiest student bodies in the UK, this is an issue that we cannot ignore. And that's only compounded by the fact that the child poverty rate in St. Andrews is one of the highest in Northeast 5. Save the Children stresses the importance of local authorities to tackle child poverty. They highlight how local authorities need to be more clear in their approach to tackling child poverty, but as well highlight the need for cooperation between both the public and third sector organizations in tackling child poverty. In addition, these changes need not be large. The Child Poverty Action Group Give Me 5 campaign highlights just how raising benefit by £5 a week for every child can help raise 30,000 children out of poverty. Both these highlight how SUGGEST local focus is the best way at combating human injustice in Scotland.
Imagine an apocalypse. Polluted waters, drained and eroding peatlands, coastal towns and villages deserted in the wake of rising sea level and coastal erosion. Massive areas of forestry afflicted by disease and a loss of people in rural areas and no birdsong. These are the words of Francesca Ossoska, head of Scottish National Heritage, talking to The Times. We have a duty to Scotland and the world to tackle climate change. And while Scotland is already a world leader in this area, more must be done. SUGGEST can help push for change in our local communities, which can go a long way in providing an example to other local authorities and helping to solve the climate crisis. Professor William Bill Austin has led the initiative to approximate the amount of carbon deposited in Scottish coastal habitats. In April, we interviewed Bill, who emphasised the climate mitigation opportunity afforded by Scottish coastlines, which make up a significant proportion of the total UK marine carbon storage. With Scotland targeting net zero in 2045 and the UK in 2050, Scotland's share of natural resources will act in the UK's favour if enough restoration evidence can be shown. Bill stated that sufficient confidence must be built for a political decision to be justified, and warned of situations where it is less expensive for governments to fund more research than it is to fix the problem. Here we believe SUGGEST's engagement with local communities by presenting policy in an engaging way can build this confidence and hold economy prioritising politicians to account. By collaborating with Climate Action 5, we can initiate change starting locally. It is the partnership between students, academics, community members, and policymakers that is required to see the changes needed to meet carbon neutral goals.
Public health, human injustice, and climate change are the largest global challenges we are facing today. Those stories are few among millions who are affected by these crises. Because the solution to these crises need change at the local level, they highlight how Suggest will be able to change the world. Each of these major global crises rely on people and leaders in their local communities to help solve them, and Suggest's local focus allows us to facilitate this change. We've spoken to you a lot about how Suggest can help formulate policies that are evidence-informed in a timely manner, but it wouldn't mean a lot if it wasn't necessary, so we did our market research. First, we spoke to Nick Bibby, the director of the Scottish Policy and Research Exchange. Much of Nick's work closely examines and supports the link between researchers and officials to seek out resourceful solutions to policy challenges. Nick was keen to point out how Suggest should form the bridge between academics and officials. Moreover, he mentioned that capacity building allows academics to contact levels of authority themselves and enable for more efficient evidence-based policymaking. We also spoke with the director of a major Scottish think tank, who highlighted the importance of starting at the local level. This way, one creates a network to help exponentially gain attention. Moreover, the talk also offered us to think and research other established journals and think tanks to see how Suggest would separate ourselves from our competitors. So, we studied other journals and think tanks. Our key takeaways from this informed us firstly on how our journal is going to be structured, how we can successfully form links and networks between academics and policymakers, and lastly, how students can successfully participate in think tanks. However, we also realized a key area of improvement in each of our journals and think tanks. None of them release articles and publications directed toward other academics. These articles are dense and do not help the general public understand the issues and policies discussed. Here is where we identified our niche. By presenting the complex data and recommendations that academics find to the general public and politicians in an easily understood format, we can facilitate increased trust, political engagement, and secure the implementation of these policies. So, to summarize all of this, from our interviews and study into President, we knew that Suggest was necessary. We were also able to identify the exact gap which Suggest would help fill.
By conducting interviews with relevant stakeholders, it became clear that Suggest filled a hole in the policy cycle. We are able to connect academics and politicians in an important way, and in doing so, prioritise evidence in the creation of policy. Our next major question we had was to whom we could market this, and what sort of impact we could make on the community. To answer this question, we turned to data.
We examined voter data released from the ONS and studies on the impact the media has on voters. We also conducted our own survey on political engagement, accountability, and the desire for our publication within our age group. This data helped us inform on how we can best reach the general public and boost political engagement. According to the data from the ONS on voters in 2019, of the top 10 areas which saw the most voter registration increase, 8 were from areas with high student populations, and the others were areas with large youth populations. This is due in part to increasing levels of engagement in the 2019 election among student populations and the youth more broadly. From this data, we decided to start small with targeting the student population in Fife for our initial launch of the publication. This will also help with implementability, as we are also starting small, but also allow us to find our footing before we move on to the main goal of making the journal accessible to everyone. Next, we looked at studies concerning the media's impact on voting to see how access to information and political slant can affect political engagement. In 2005 to 2006, American researchers gave one group a conservative-leaning newspaper and another group a liberal-leaning newspaper for free for 10 weeks, and then observed their political knowledge and opinions. They found that the informational effect of media on voter turnout is greater than the political slant of newspapers, meaning that just having access to information was more likely to boost one's political engagement. This study shows the importance of accessibility of information. This is why we are making a digital magazine which aims to bring accessible information to the public in order to increase political engagement.
There's a significant drop in voter turnout between the 1950 UK general election and the 2015 UK general election. In a study by the British Psychological Society, this was due to 3 issues surrounding voter apathy. The first is the diffusion of responsibility. The second is pluralistic ignorance. And the third is evaluation apprehension. In order to boost voter connection, we need to identify who voters are, so what demographics in an area, understand what is important to voters and why. Why do people care about these issues? And communicate with voters more effectively. The study then laid out different strategies to deal with these three areas. In order to understand voters and connect to them on another level, and then in order to boost engagement, we have to focus on issues which are important to them. We need to maximize our reach with issues that are meaningful to our target audience. The study on voter apathy helps us focus on a strategy for our journal. We will target the most important issues for voters and local authorities, depending on which authority that is, and launch a journal with these issues in mind and our target audiences in mind. In addition, we will make the data and information more engaging by crafting stories around the data to humanize it. Our online publication will be able to reach more of our audience by implementing the strategies from the study.
We decided to conduct our own study in order to see what sort of mediums could be best utilized in order to boost political engagement. We created a Google Forms survey and posted it on our respective social media channels. The form was left up for 24 hours. All responses are anonymous. The 77 respondents were largely between the ages of 18 and 20 and were university students in the UK. The vast majority of respondents primarily consume social media, with a smaller proportion saying digital newspapers. The majority of respondents indicated that they consume media related to politics often. The majority of respondents use either digital newspapers and/or social media as their main source on politics. These graphs demonstrate that the majority of responses did not feel that policy is evidence-based, and that they believe the link between university and policymakers is weak and should be made stronger. The final important finding from our study indicated that videos, online publications, and infographics were the mediums which would boost political engagement the most out of our respondents.
We found that our target audience consider information about news and politics primarily from social media and online publications. By presenting complex information using creative mediums such as videos and infographics, we can present complex data in a way which will engage all our audience. This was a crucial finding as it helped us craft our publications in a way which we can have the biggest impact on our target audience. The next major question we had to address was how we would implement SUGGESP. SUGGESP is an ambitious project, so we were told many times to our interviewees and everyone we told about SUGGESP. But we think it's definitely worth the challenge.
Moving on from our research, we needed to ensure that our project could be implementable, so we placed implementability at the heart of our design. SUGGESP focuses on using the existing bodies of academics and students at the university and harnessing their skills to solve problems. Alongside this, student journalists will work to produce an online medium, divulging that information to the general public. Our smaller focus, which we believe makes us unique, also allows us to make a big difference without the need for large-scale international networks. In addition, it will allow our online publication to focus on storytelling, presenting evidence-based policy in an engaging, personal way. Not only will this encourage engagement from our local communities, strengthening the link between the public, local authorities, and wider spheres of politics, but by making the public-facing aspect of our project online, we can reduce costs and harness the power of social media as a marketing tool, increasing engagement and implementability. In short, we believe the St Andrews Journal of Emergency Scientific Policy can achieve policies that are evidence-informed in a timely and appropriate way to enable effective responses to global crises. We have provided a solution which stakeholders have told us they would find useful in a way which is highly implementable. And by focusing on the local level, we can make real, meaningful improvements to the lives of people rapidly in times of crisis.
Hi everyone, I'm Scarlett. I'm currently a third year's international relations student, and I'm keen to get into this project because I think me and Sam have some great ideas for ways to help improve crisis response in the future.
Sadly, my camera quality isn't quite as good as Scarlett's, so I'm very enviable that I have to follow her now. My name is Sam. I'm the other half of the project. I am an economics and international relations student, and I'm passionate about this project because of the power of sport that I've seen and experienced firsthand. Sport is something that's incredibly special to me and something that I'm so excited to share with you all.
So sport has always been a really important part of who I am, whether that's been growing up playing football with my friends across a field, or as I came to university, trying something new, a way to socialize, meet people, just sort of like improve myself and learn more sort of transferable skills and just in a fun, engaging way. It's also really helped me with my own personal fitness and just sort of finding time to like take care of my like physical well-being as well as the sort of my mental well-being. And what I found was after COVID sort of became a real prominent issue, I found myself with a lot of less choice as to how I was going to be able to actually get these things, which I'd sort of structured my life around for quite a few years now. Like, where was I gonna necessarily find that sort of physical outlet after like a long day's work? Was I meant to just like, you know, all of a sudden become one of those people who was very like self-dependent and able to maintain that sort of discipline required to sort of get up and go on a run each day? For me, the sort of transition from regular life to COVID life was particularly pronounced in sort of how I was looking after myself well-being wise, and the lack of sort of any consideration for this sort of other element to like things like particularly sport really was impactful on me and a lot of people's mental health, because I don't think there's ever been enough sort of consideration to like how people depend on like social and cultural events to maintain themselves. And I think that has been particularly pronounced in the past year or so, where we haven't been able to use these things that a lot of people have anchored their livelihoods to. And so as a result, I think crisis response has been quite ineffectual because it hasn't actually taken into consideration what a number of people find deeply important.
I had a very opposite experience to Scarlett. For me, most of my life, sport hasn't been a part of my identity and hasn't been a bedrock of my life. It's not something that I've grown up with as a part of me. I've always been surrounded by sport, but it wasn't something I've ever internalized or engaged with until much later in my life. For me, sport had always been something that felt distant and something that I didn't fit into. One of my earliest memories was being beaten up at a school sports day by an older brother, being called a fairy and a faggot. As a gay man, sport had always felt something that was exclusive and something that I wasn't a part of, or something that I couldn't be included in. Nevertheless, I was always surrounded by sport. My family are an incredibly sporty family. I have some very talented sports people within my family, and this is something they've always taken great pride in. And I think this again contributed to this feeling of being excluded, because I've never excelled at sport. I'm not a particularly good sports person, so it was always something that felt very distant to me. Yet when coming on to university, it's become a huge part of my life and something that I've come to depend on, much like Scarlett. It's been something that has helped me grow and develop as a person and manage my mental and physical well-being. But more importantly, it's given me a family away from family. It's given me a support network. It's given me friends for life. And those people have become incredibly important to me. And that's all down to the fantastic environment that sport creates and the fantastic sort of relationships it cultivates. And that's something, again, that we feel was lacking when considering the crisis response for the coronavirus.
So before we go any further, what I'd like to do for us is to sort of walk you through what our project actually is. So we've mentioned sport and the sort of the failings we've perceived in the approach to sort of the role of sport during COVID. But I really want to talk about how we think that can A, be addressed, and B, the sort of helpings we get through crisis response afterwards. So me and Sam have come up with an idea, which is to basically bring people back into the equation. We want to launch a sort of additional training session for coaching courses. So as it stands, most people who coach will know that you have to undergo a qualification. There are different levels, but there's always sort of a starting level, and then it goes up. And what me and Sam would like to do is to include an ethnographic approach element to these coaching courses. Basically, we want to be able to bring coaches in and ask them why things work and why things don't in certain environments. We want to know what are the important cultural values in your particular area. What have you observed? And by giving them this sort of element of training, we're going to prepare them better for giving us answers that will be able to be effectively turned into qualitative data, which we can then be reflective of in our policy response. And not only does this help sort of policy responders in general, this will help us understand individuals. Currently, our approach has been, okay, so here's the science. This is what we need to do. But it's then failed to understand that different communities interpret these facts differently. There are different things which have been sort of internalized, which will affect their responses. For example, sort of COVID vaccine uptakes. There are concerns over minority groups not wanting the vaccine. There are concerns over young people not wanting the vaccine. But there's never been enough research or thought put into, well, how are we going to actually address this rather than launch a propaganda campaign? Let's understand the root causes. Let's put that into policy formation, policy response. Let's get the data. Let's put in an infrastructure that will be present throughout our sort of policy term. So we don't just all of a sudden panic and don't understand these groups. We'll have somewhere to look. We'll have an avenue through which we can try and understand this qualitative data. And we believe sport is the perfect, basically, refractor to help look into these individual communities and sort of understand how and why these groups think, and then be able to formulate responses more effectively.
We've both spoken at length about the importance of sport and people within sport, and how sport is in a unique position to give us insight and generate this qualitative data that we've been sort of mentioning repeatedly. Sport is so people-centric, and it is about the people that are in it, and that's one of the greatest strengths of sport, one of the greatest joys of sport. It's something that me and Scarlett have both personally experienced, and I know many others here today probably have also experienced at some point in their lives. We want to utilize that for good and utilize that to help push forward this more inclusive policy-making methodology. But in order to do that, it would be wrong for us to not talk to people within sport themselves and not bring those people in. So as a part of this proposal and part of our process, we interviewed multiple people from across the UK sports industry and sector to get their views on sort of sport's role within society and how sport could be used to further better society. As a part of this, we fulfilled our ethics application, and they have all consented to have their clips shared with us today, and are fully happy for us to sort of share their names and share our findings. I wanted to give that in an effort of full disclosure. It would be great for you to sort of see firsthand some of the sort of knowledge and experience that these sort of fantastic individuals have, and the sort of insights that we can gain from them. It's also worth mentioning that neither of us would be able to conduct these interviews and embrace this methodology if it wasn't thanks to sport itself, giving us the confidence and the skills to actually engage in this sort of research and this sort of communication and actually this performative ethnography that we're encouraging our coaches themselves to practice. These are all skills that sport has already taught us and already given us in an informal way. What me and Scarlett are proposing is a way to codify and formalize that so that the benefits can reach the very top. One of the first interviews we did was with Lee Boucher from Scottish Rowing, and I'll move over to the recorded clip from that so you can get an insight into sort of Lee's role.
The first question is just, what is your professional background within sport?
In sports, so currently I'm the head of performance and pathways at Scottish Rowing. So I guess my role there very much is to support more Scottish athletes progressing onto GB pathways and GB teams. Prior to that, so I've been with Scottish Rowing for about 4 years. Prior to that, I had about 8 or 9 years with Tennis Scotland, where I had a variety of roles, sort of starting off on the sort of business side of the operation, and then latterly, I was sort of head of performance there for a couple of years. And yeah, that's sort of, those are the sort of my two main roles within sport.
Next, we have an interview from Scott Tiesta from Saint Sport.
It'd be great to know a little bit about your professional background in sport.
Okay, cool. If I ramble, stop me if I'm not on the right page, but you keep me right. So it kind of all started when I left school. I went into a bit of a modern apprenticeship with Scottish Rugby. Post that, I went on to be a rugby development officer within the Fife Council. Again, working in line with Scottish Rugby, working with schools, kids, all that jazz, from kind of grassroots level up to academy level and some of the national squads within Scottish Rugby. That's when I kind of took more specialist interest in strength and conditioning for rugby. Volunteered my time, went back into education, got a degree in strength and conditioning sports science, and that's led me to work with professional teams, collegiate athletes within university and national governing bodies such as Scottish Rugby, and it takes me to kind of where I am today.
Scarlett was also able to interview the director of rugby currently at the St Andrews, which is Scott Lawson, and I'll pass over to Scarlett for an introduction.
The question I'd like to ask is just sort of a bit of background. What's your professional background within sport, and sort of what have you done that sort of set yourself up a bit?
Right, okay. So if you want to say start back professionally, like I was a professional rugby player from 2003 till 2018. So yes, a 15-year professional career. Played for Glasgow, Sale Sharks, Gloucester, London Irish, and Newcastle. So yeah, sort of quite a long professional career from age of 21 to 36. Now director of rugby at University of St Andrews. So made the sort of transition from professional player to coach. So back to my playing, I was also 47 caps for Scotland, and also sort of went to 2 World Cups and numerous Six Nations campaigns. So yeah, very experienced player. Into coaching, along with my coaching qualification, degree in leadership and management. So very kind of well sort of versed to deal with the kind of theory, as well as calling on my practical experiences. And from a coaching point of view, still relatively young from an experience point of view, but used all that kind of experience I've got from my playing background to try and become a better kind of coach.
Sadly, our final interview had some issues with the audio, so we won't actually be able to show you that one, but it was with Ross Whitaker, who is the director of triathlon at the University of St Andrews up at Saint Sport as well. And he gave us some fantastic insights, which you can read more about on the report. Like I mentioned, sport is so much about the people, and we really wanted to give this opportunity for our interviewees to introduce themselves and give you a little bit of a background and understanding of these people and these sort of titans of industry. All of these people are incredibly active across the sector, and just from those small clips there, you can see the sort of ranges of experiences they bring and the range of insights that they've been able to help give us. I promise it wasn't just a way to show sort of the various stages of our lockdown haircuts or our sort of outfit changes throughout the season. They did serve some purpose. And again, I want to show you some key clips from those interviews now to give you some sort of really interesting insight into the sort of dynamics of sport. We're going to first hear back from Lee from Scottish Rowing, who's going to talk to us about how athletes and community are intertwined and how sport is an integral part of that, and how we can use sport as a tool within communities?
I think the sport of rowing's had to adapt and adapt quite quickly. All sports had to adapt. But certainly we have traditionally had a lot of contact time with our athletes face to face. You know, our coaches, particularly within the performance programs, would generally coach most sessions in a given week. And as you know, Sam, rowing is, there's quite a lot of sessions in a competitive club program. There's quite a lot of sessions in a given week. A big thing about our sport is teamwork, and certainly on the water, you're effectively in a crew boat, you're only as strong as the weakest link in your crew. So we've got to help each other, and I think that attitude and mindset filtered down into how our athletes and coaches responded to things. And as you say, there were some really good examples of people like Polly Swan, who will be announced in today's Tokyo team, but she took time out from being a full-time athlete to go back into the NHS and help support that the work that was needing done at that point in time. And that was a really courageous thing of her to do. And for me, sport, just in its most general terms, is about finding a community of shared interests and shared values. I think there's lots of studies that have been done about the benefits of sport, physically, mentally, socially as well. And I think for me, sport is about, it's about that sort of shared community, and then ultimately, the bit that I'm working in, I guess, and through the performance space, it's about enabling dreams and aspirations to be achieved. So it's encouraging people that if you want to go on that journey, there are other people out there who you can go on that journey with. Bringing people together with taking away a lot of the external noise and distractions that are outside of the sports space. Whenever you come into that sporting environment, hopefully in the programs that we're working with, there aren't there aren't things that are causing people distress or concern. People are coming in with a shared goal, which is enjoyment and progression within their sport. Because we've got quite a comprehensive network of support wrapped around our athletes here in Scotland. So we've obviously, each of our athletes is within a club program. The club program has their club coach. Above that, we've got support from Scottish Rowing, myself. We've got support from the Sport Scotland Institute of Sport. That there's a whole medical practitioner team there that is qualified to support any physical or mental issues as they arise. So I guess what I would be hoping would be that, well, first of all, the coach would act sensitively to whatever matter is either brought to their attention or something that they have spotted. I would hope that is managed carefully in discussions with the athlete as to what they want to happen in terms of any potential intervention. And we have had many examples of where the coach has asked for additional support, either through myself or through one of the practitioners within the institute team. And as I say, that then brings with it a whole range of expertise in areas that sometimes coaches aren't particularly comfortable with. So yeah, it's just about communication. It's about escalating at the right time and with the right authority.
We clearly see that sport plays a large role in the community, but can also empower individuals within this community. This is something both the other Scots, Scott Lawson and Scott Tiest, built on, and how the network of sport is used to leverage broad benefits.
Yeah, I think through a lot of the jobs I've had, so development officer per se, a lot of relationships with school teachers, people that run the school, parents, the kids, kind of other development officers, other sports, kind of leaders within the council, kind of loads of other people, loads of connections to that. Within strength and conditioning, I think the athletes, the coaches, the directors, the facilities guys, the groundsmen, literally everybody, I think I had some sort of relationship with them. with everyone when I'm kicking about. The main thing, the main thing I think sport does is it gives people like something to do. Off the back of something to do, I think that affects how we train our body. If we can train our body, we can train our minds. So being more like on a selfish level, if you can work hard in the gym, you can work hard kind of anywhere. Or on the sports field, if you look after your fitness, I think everyone else kind of takes care of itself with regards to your health, with regards to your education. But I think there's obviously so much more to that, like coming together in sport. It's not just an individual, there's loads of people there, so you have that kind of community aspect, you have that kind of social development. One's maybe working with like some like communities. So for example, there was a school we worked in that was in quite a deprived area, and the kids never really got that much support. However, there was some funding there from the kind of government that was pumped into sport, and then rugby was kind of put within that curriculum in the school. And I think what happened there was it was getting kids like active, it was kind of getting them off the street where they might be kind of causing kind of mayhem, and it was quite a rough area. But got them off the street, got them playing rugby, got them involved within a rugby club, and then within that rugby club they had like more support network, more friends, and it made their kind of transition to when they're younger, transition into like a high school where they might have caused more issues because of stress and all these different problems. I think it really ingrained them more into the community, and they became more of a kind of respected member rather than being kind of in trouble with the police and kind of causing mayhem through the streets. So I was done through a charity, so like it wasn't really the coach's job to do that. It was from a kind of the social workers, kind of social care department within the council that would highlight different risks. We also work with the police, and that's kind of they identified the kids that were kind of at risk, as you might say, and then put them within, if they met the eligible criteria from their point of view, and that would kind of put them in the program. But in terms of like maybe within that as well, maybe the coaches were probably identifying the kids that were almost more at risk within that group, and I think that's just a case of, well, from my point of view, I would like get to know the person first and the athlete second. So I think just getting to know the person, understanding who they are, what they are, and where they came from, I think it gives you a good understanding of kind of what their needs are, and if you understand what their needs are, that helps us kind of identify maybe who needs more, what generally speaking, maybe who needs extra attention, who maybe doesn't need as much attention, how they kind of learn.
So if you look at the rugby element of it, all of the members of the clubs that I'm involved with, every kind of personal interaction or social circumstance has just been completely severed. But to a regulated, monitored, controlled environment on the rugby field, people have been able to get together in groups of 10, 15, 20, and say from a social point of view, I think that's been vitally important. And then you add in all of the exercise benefits when people's activity levels are low. So I feel like the last year that rugby, especially at the university, with 100+ people that we deal with, has been almost been an essential part of the year. And I think it's been critical in a numerous sort of guises: mental, physical, social, even giving someone some purpose to what you do, a bit of routine because you're setting time when you have to do it. It's almost been one of the most single point of contact to socialization, like socializing with people, and then as a result of that, give them some real strong sort of well-being benefits. Just certain examples, I think it'd be really easy to, so during lockdown, like lockdown 1, you had to be really self-motivated to go for a walk, go for a run. And even from a personal point of view, I started to kind of drag myself out to do that. Luckily, I had my children made me do that, and for their well-being, I went and did that. But for young adults, say some of yourself, 18 to 24 at the university, like the easy thing is just to get into this rut and stay in that sort of just lethargic state. Whereas if you put training times on through sport, it makes you go, and then you enjoy it, and it's a bit of a snowball effect. It's positive on positive on positive. We're fortunate enough to have a very strong governing body that had good links with the government. And every time there was an announcement, that it was fed through into the clubs, and I felt like they were trying to get as many people out playing rugby and giving timelines and making groups as big as they possibly could, as safely as they could, as much as they can. So I didn't understand it. I think they thought it was an hour of exercise kept you going. I don't think there was any appreciation for the the huge list of benefit that comes from being associated with a sport, a team sport, competition element, accountability, everything. I think it was, they didn't see it. They basically saw it as a heart raising exercise for X amount to do some movement. They didn't value the sport element of it, in my opinion.
You sort of locate it in sort of society. Like, what do you think sports' role is within sort of communities?
I think it sits at the heart of just, or it should do, sit at the heart of every single community. Youngster, like say a bigger rugby club, that was a hive of activity. Everyone went into that and fed into it, and it pulled together like young, old people from out with the community came. It's a really integral part of society. It kind of extended beyond sport. It became a place that you could go and support and watch. Like say, if you talk about your small rural villages and things, and that's just one example via rugby, whereas other sports are the same. But yeah, I don't think it gets the resource and the additional benefits from it that it possibly could do.
Here we can see that sport had real powerful benefits to larger communities and was an integral part of those communities. But these aren't just based on these three personal experiences. There's so many broader examples as well. To finish off, to show the real power of sport and its use for policymakers, I want to focus on 3 levels and 3 different case studies. I want to first look at the local level on how we can use sport to generate qualitative data. If we look at Saint Sport and my time as volunteer and engagement officer and now the diversity and inclusion officer, we use the regular coach feedback to ensure that we can enact policies which would benefit the community or our sporting community. Thanks to the high level of contact time and new training given to coaches, committee members and staff, as of this year, we were able to proactively respond to issues, creating policy responses based on their observations. This is something that was praised when I attended the recent university-wide Equally Safe Forum, where Saint Sport was shown to be leading the way in tackling gender-based violence within the university, as it had adopted practices such as reporting mandatory staff training, compulsory education workshops, and other sort of additional measures. Other great examples come from the national level, such as the use of sport in tackling gang violence. Scott sort of touched upon one of the projects he was working in, but I've also seen it within my own local community in Coventry. Coventry has long suffered from gang violence, and sport has been used as a way to tackle this, as a way to identify vulnerable people, give line of updates on current dynamics, as well as events, and rehabilitate members of the community. Another scheme in Bent Borough found that 65% involved within sport did not reoffend or rejoin gangs. The UN has also identified sport as a vehicle for crime prevention, recognising its ability to inform crime policy. The UN has praised sport on multiple occasions. Internationally, it continues to use sport as a tool for peace building. To quote, sport is ideally positioned to contribute towards the United Nations objectives for development and peace. In South Africa, it was used to bridge racial divides. The Bridging Divides programme was used to combat racial stereotypes through the use of grassroots community basketball and then inform racial policy. Similar schemes abound within the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Critically, all these case studies show the potential of sport. However, only the first example with Saint Sport shows the power of sport as a constant source of information and qualitative data, with the others being more targeted and temporary. Sadly, it is only recently that Saint Sport has been invited to contribute to wider university strategies, whether it be that the Student Services Open Forum or the Equally Safe group. This is thanks to the hard work of previous AU presidents and student leaders, with the creation of wellbeing roles being allowing us to get this constant feedback loop. This could be scaled up rapidly to include the entire UK and help policymakers benefit on a wider scale, because whilst the UK government is bureaucratic, nothing quite beats academia.
Thanks for listening. I just want to wrap things up a little quickly to sort of give you a quick summary of what we've been talking about. Sport. It's the lifeblood of a number of communities. And crisis has interrupted that to a detrimental level. There's been a lack of acknowledgement and a lack of sort of working through this problem in a way which facilitates the sort of more important social elements of sport. Policy response in terms of a crisis has not only neglected it and sort of pushed it off to the side as something unimportant, but it hasn't seen its benefits. What me and Sam want to do is we want to fix that. We want to bring to attention the social importance of sport. We want to bring to attention what sport offers us. And we want to put it in a systematic framework from which we can draw from that information in order to have a far more effective policy response in the future to crises. We can do it. It just needs one. These two things aren't unconnected. Sport and crisis will be forever interlinked in the same way that people and crisis are forever interlinked, because none of these things are separable. We can make policy response better, but we have to include people.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for your lovely presentations. We have now come to the Q&A session. We are a couple of minutes ahead of the schedule, so that means that I think that we should just power through and get to the questions. And when we are questioned out, if that happens before the official time, then we can have an extended break. So let's see. I see something happening in the chat there. Request for a short comfort break. Is that the general consensus? I'm sure. Yeah, there are a couple of other. Fair enough. Then let's have a comfort break and resume at the official time, which is 2:25. Right, welcome back. Let's see if we have people. Oh, there we go. Right, so it's time for the Q&A. So we have approximately 40 minutes. And I'm going to hand over the word to the panel of judges. Do you have any questions for any of the teams?
Vicky, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Sure. I'm assuming that we do have all of the team members on. Should we start with team one and get people from team one on camera so that I can see who I'm talking? Hi, Tom. Hi, Leonor. Hi, Katsuo. Hi. Great. Thank you so much for those of you who don't know me. I don't think any of you will know me actually. I'm Vicky Ward. I'm from the School of Management where I'm a reader, and I do research around knowledge use and the use of knowledge and research-based evidence in policy and practice. So that's why kind of Ricardo asked me to come on board and bring my expertise to this process such that it is. So thank you so much for your presentation. First off, it was really great to hear, and it was lovely to hear your ideas. I thought as well the range of materials that you produced was really impressive, and that you'd actually put all of that work into all of those different things. I thought that was great. I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more though about how you came up with your focus on engaging the electorate as a way of making sure that policies are more evidence informed, and how the idea of an engaged electorate relates to the evidence-basedness of policy. So if you just talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Is that okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, so while we were kind of thinking initially about what approach we would take to the question, kind of reading around and having a think, we kind of found a correlation between, I mean, most recently, obviously, the kind of coronavirus pandemic has been the main thing, the main global crisis of the current period. And we felt that there was this big disconnect and a correlation we saw between these places where there were really, you know, bad responses to like the coronavirus pandemic, and also things like mistrust in vaccines, which obviously has a big impact on how well people can respond to the pandemic. We noticed there was a big correlation there between people's engagement in the political process and people's awareness of, you know, the issues at hand. So that was kind of the main. And then as we looked more into that, we found these correlations like kind of reduced youth turnout in British elections leading up to, you know, a trend continuing up to the most recent election of the current government, who's obviously been overseeing the country's fairly poor response to the crisis. So yeah, that was kind of the thinking behind our approach there. So yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand. I'm going to let Karen and Dan go next.
Thanks. My question, actually, I wanted to ask all the teams. This may be showing both my age, but I hope it kind of gives an illustration. You know, we watch Dragon's Den in my household. My husband loves it. And if you were going in and kind of pitching this and you had to give one line that really captured what your project is about and how it answers the given question, could you kind of give me that one line?
Well, for us, I guess it would be, we are trying to give the electorate, the Scottish electorate, the tools with which they can be more informed and more engaged in the political process in Scotland.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry. Did you ask all the teams to say one line about the...
Sorry, no, let me go ahead. Let's finish with team one and then I'll come back and ask it. Sorry, I didn't clarify that well. I was trying to give Dan some space to ask.
Dan's having trouble with his sticky mute button.
Well, I feel like we're in a mute off here. So anyway.
Thanks. Mine was just a quick question on your educate point. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about why you chose 12 to 15-year-olds as the demographic to target for this.
Oh.
Sorry, I just realised I was muted. That's a great question, Dan. So 12 to 15-year-olds will be the demographic that are just starting to engage a lot more online. At least for me, that was definitely when I started my social media accounts. That's when a lot of my free time, instead of playing outside, that it converted onto an online space. And when I liaised with the public engagement officer, they said that this would be a particularly great age group to focus on at the start. If we get the opportunity to develop our ideas, then we would look at introducing other topics to younger age groups to ensure that it starts off from a young age, this awareness of being involved in democracy. But it is worth to note that this lesson is going to be taken into schools in the autumn by the public engagement officer. So I consider it to be quite a successfully targeted age group.
Leonor, I feel really mean asking you another question because you're clearly somewhere busy and busy doing stuff.
I'm outside of my house at the moment. I apologise if you can't hear me clearly.
No, I can hear you really, really well.
Okay, brilliant.
So this is just another question on the education end of things. I'm just wondering if you've got any information or you know very much about to what extent these kind of skills around democratic engagement are already taught in Scottish schools, because I wondered whether there is already some stuff in the curriculum that you could possibly piggyback on around this, but I don't know that much about it, but I have a suspicion that there is some stuff, and I wonder if you know more than me.
It's definitely not something I'm aware of, and definitely not something that I could easily access when I was researching my project. So I do think it is an area in which there is a gap in market to teach young people about the democratic process. I mean, I could be entirely mistaken, but definitely not from my own research.
All right, thank you.
If I could just add to that, as somebody who went through the Scottish system, you can obviously do have these opportunities to learn about the democratic process, but they're in sort of structured sociology or modern studies classes, and that in PSHE you don't really get this targeted approach to tackle it or to engaging with young people in learning about how they can get involved.
Great, thanks Tom for that insider insight.
I had a question that's probably a little bit too mean, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I was thinking about the sort of live updates on motions in the Scottish Parliament idea, and I just wondered about, so sometimes the titles of motions maybe not entirely reflective of what the vote was actually on, or the way people vote is sometimes, you know, not necessarily a binary choice on a very clear issue. And I just wonder whether you had any reflections on actually the risk of this fueling misinformation by oversimplifying something that could be more complex and nuanced than a perhaps binary vote on something that wasn't entirely clear?
No, yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, so a big emphasis we wanted to put on the kind of technological side of things is that we didn't want to get too much into the area of like adding any subjective opinions on anything. You know, there are services that do fact checking and will add commentary to different things, but we kind of wanted to emphasize making, you know, information that is already out there more accessible and easy to access. So the information that we are wanting to put up live, that's kind of all the information that the Scottish government themselves puts out on these motions. And all our goal really was to put this somewhere where people are actually probably going to come across it more frequently. And we do make sure, you know, to have a link to the actual source of that information. So the Scottish Government page has a kind of detailed list of the minutes from the debates that are surrounding the motion. Obviously, there's always a risk online with anything on kind of Twitter and Facebook that you are going to oversimplify and kind of reduce complex tasks down. But I think, you know, combined with the other two aspects of our project, you know, helping young people to engage more successfully with kind of social media and the Scottish and general kind of government process, hopefully those kind of all work together to mitigate that risk as much as possible.
We question out for team one for now. I suppose we can do each team in order, and then we'll open up for the audience and participants after a while. Yes. Well, thank you, Kaz, Tom, and Leo. Very nice to hear your answers. Team two. So I assume that's you, Karthik.
Yeah, hello. And sorry, my teammate couldn't be here. He's in the US, so it's pretty early, and I think he has to go to work.
Since you've heard my question, should I just go ahead and repeat it again for you? Okay. So again, it's kind of, what is your one-line hook that really captures your project and how it answers the question posed?
Okay, yeah, I have an advantage. I had time to think about that. So it's a way of generating policy that harnesses the power of crowdsourcing and is reinforced by evidence from academics. That's what, and then of course there's also, this isn't one line anymore, but there's also the social media part, which spreads information about contested topics.
Okay, thanks. I'll come back in a minute. I'll let other people ask their questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation, Karthik. I found it really interesting and really engaging as well. It was, and I thought that your way of getting across your ideas was really helpful as well. So I liked your kind of engaging presentation style. It was really nice. One of the things that really interested me though was the thinking around the effectiveness bit. And I remember noticing from when you flashed up some of the bits and pieces from the website that there was around the policy problem, there was what people wanted in terms of the different categories and things. And I noticed that cost effectiveness was in there. And so I just wondered if you've got some reflections about how well you think your idea kind of can manage to tick that effectiveness box, or even that cost effectiveness box, if that's what you're giving people as an option. What is it? What mechanisms do you have that mean that, you know, a policymaker is going to know that the policy solution is effective or cost effective? Because obviously people spend a lot of time trying to evaluate the effectiveness of various policies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. And it's so when we have the policy problem posted on the website, we make sure to say what the submitter was looking for. So hopefully when the students submit a solution, they say, oh, okay, so this is what they want, and this is how my solution will be ranked. And that's one part of it. And the second part is when ranking the solutions, we ask the academics what they think. And there is a question of, can an academic really say for certain if this is effective or not? And we did actually see that, because people did disagree. We made sure to have more than one judge for each policy. But yeah, so far that's our way of doing it, but we think there may be a better way also.
And that links to my, I had another question actually, which was what aspects of the like policy do you think need further development? And so it sounds like that's one aspect of it. Is there anything else that you think that you'd want to develop further for you to forward?
Yeah, so there seems to be this, so another thing we noticed is that some responses from students were basically essays, and some were like paragraphs, and we need to make the question more structured. So if this was an exam question, it wouldn't just be, it should be more like part A, part B, and also make it more clear what we're looking for, and perhaps that would help the crowdsourcing effort. We don't want to make it too structured and sort of take away the creativity, but that's the challenge as well.
Lovely,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask about the Elite Explains section, and it's similar to my previous question actually. I know that your GIFs would be very well researched and evidence-based. I just wondered how you would help make sure that users of social media didn't take that to lead to a belief that you can believe any information you see in a GIF, and how you would distinguish your posts from completely misinformed posts.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in the beginning, our idea was actually to tie our social media account with the university. Now, that was a proposal because that would obviously add to the fact that our posts are reliable and people can actually believe in them. We didn't get to testing that because of the hassle of having to make sure everything we posted was correct. But that is something which is important to our proposal, which, yeah.
I just have kind of one more question, which, well, I think it's kind of a continuation. It is in my own head. There seems to be kind of a selling and marketing issue here that needs to be addressed, which is how are you going to convince policy makers to pose a question in this arena? And then how do you convince academics and students to kind of give back, right? And to answer the query. So what is your thinking on how to kind of market or sell it to those two audiences, three audiences?
Yeah, that's definitely a major concern. And before I answer, may I just quickly turn on the chart? My battery's at like 4%, which is, I'll be back. Okay, sorry about that. I thought the switch was on. So yeah, so the first part about making people submit problems to us, we found it difficult with politicians and councillors, because at the time we asked for solutions and problems, it was not good timing because they had elections coming up and they were just generally busy. In fact, Willie Rennie, I think the Lib Dem leader of Scotland, he actually forwarded our website to his research man, and basically, yeah, the idea was they didn't have enough time at the moment, but so we ended up getting a solution from a policy think tank, and they were more open-ended to using such a tool, I suppose. So there is the question of how do we market this to, and who do we market, and when, and those are all things we still have to figure out. And to do with the students, again, there was a similar timing issue because this was just before study break, and people were catching up with lectures that they just not watched before. And yeah, but we still actually got more, a good amount of responses. We would have liked more. We think, as I said before, if the question was more structured, the policy problem, they might have been more open to answer. And also just pointing out to make it clear that they didn't need to have much background knowledge on the issue at all. Just we needed to use their creativity and the fact that they've never seen this problem before, and they might come up with something, a new perspective. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for team 2? Otherwise, we can move on to team 3 then. Excellent. Thank you, Karthik. I'm sure we can come back to you later if someone in the audience has a question. Right, so Hayden, Gian Andrea, Nu, Elizabeth, and Svenja. Fantastic. Good to see you. I suppose Karen wants to repeat her question.
Sure. Sorry. So again, if you could kind of give that one-line hook on how exactly you're answering the question and what your project seeks to do, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, luckily we kind of prepared for this whilst we were before the presentation, so we kind of have some sort of like business plan, vision statements I'll read out to you. So what we have is to be a nationally recognized scientific policy journal and a public-oriented publication that links science, government, and the public in order to facilitate political engagement, accountability, and feed directly into government to change policy at a local level.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bit of a long one, but.
Very clear. Thank you very much. And yeah, well done on your presentation as well. Really big team that you were managing as well. So that's always a challenge, I think. And I thought you did really well with that. I was really interested in this idea. I was really interested because you'd kind of gone out and actually had looked at what other people were doing as well in this space. So I thought that was very interesting. One of the things that I was wondering about though is where you talk quite a lot about the academic community and about the public and that kind of getting that link there and making publishing your more academic pieces in easier to read formats and things like that, accepting that often things targeted at academics are completely full of jargon and really, really difficult to read and understand. For some of us who are academics, as well as anyone else, I might add sometimes. I wondered where you put policymakers, though, in that dynamic. Because, the journal, I think it feels like you're kind of aiming at an academic audience, but also a policymaker audience. And I wasn't really sure. I suppose I was just thinking, how do you conceive of policymakers in this space? Are they members of the public who need things in a kind of more simple and digested form, or are they more academic so they can digest things that are in the full journal? Where do you see them fitting in?
Yeah, so the idea of the journal is that it's actually producing sort of policy papers. So I think that's going to be things that politicians are quite used to handling and policymakers understand that. But also that public facing thing is a good way of, they need to be briefed just before they're going into a meeting. Maybe they can just read that and get an idea of what we are suggesting. And then on top of that, the reason why we're focusing local is because the people we were talking to whilst we were doing this market research all stressed the fact that, it's so difficult to infiltrate national policy because people are juggling so many things that they just can't have time to listen to you. You have to go and actually talk to them face to face and interrupt them and harass them in their day. So that's not quite the same at a local level because people are more willing to engage and listen. So we hope that kind of our whole publication and just the resources that we're producing can feed directly and we can have more of a relationship and a back and forth there.
Is it okay if I ask a quick follow-up question on that as well? Just when you were talking about that relationship, that was one of the other things I was wondering about actually, because you talked at various points about the idea about networking and creating relationships and things. And I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about how you see that working in practice, because you said particularly in your report a lot about how the journal itself would work with all the boards and everything else. But I wondered about the networking aspect of it, because the one thing that we know from research in this space is it's all about relationships.
Yeah, I mean, at a kind of practical level, I guess that is formed of, people having to do that on their own back, go and email people and try and get engagement. But, from everyone we emailed, we had a pretty positive response back. And it felt sort of like people were interested in our project and they thought it was something that they would be interested in engaging with and becoming a part of. So I think that seems sort of already there, that, the link's there and people want this. So that's why we kind of presented it in that way.
I don't have any follow-up questions because that link with policymakers is exactly what I was going to ask. You just asked it in a far more articulate way than I would have.
No, I just read your mind, Dan.
I'll ask. I mean, for me, I'm wondering about what the next steps might be, right? If, you know, if you win, right? No predictions. I'm just saying what happens next. And I think it also goes back to even a cost effectiveness question. Who, you know, there is award money, but also where will the cost continue to be borne? And then what is kind of the plan for, I just have lost the word I'm looking for, kind of institutional knowledge. How are you going to bring other people on board to continue to run it? You know, if this gets related to St. Andrews, who next becomes the leader, right? And how do you find the next generation of leadership?
Yeah, so I think we kind of continue with these links that we'd started to build throughout our research. Maybe reach out to those people looking for more guidance about how they began their own sort of think tanks, and try and tap into some of the knowledge at the university and some of the professors we spoke to. And then we'd obviously have to kind of drive a lot of that, I think, to kind of get things rolling. And Hayden, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, and we talked to 2 directors of think tanks in Scotland, and they also talked about events so that can help bear some of the costs. St. Andrews already has a wide network, and so we should be able to host events to help fundraise, which will help on the cost effectiveness side. And also because we're utilizing staff and students at St. Andrews, that can also be a bit of cost effectiveness because many professional think tanks have to employ a wide variety of staff, and plus with an online publication rather than like solid print books like the Oxford University Press or Harvard Journal, we can save money there as well.
Yeah, if I can quickly jump in there as well, like one thing we were constantly thinking about throughout the entirety of the project is, you know, we're just 5 students at the University of St. Andrews. Why should anyone listen to us, academics or policymakers for that matter? And so, especially what Hayden was talking about, the people we spoke to about public events, and not to mention COP21 in Glasgow, you know, it'd be a great opportunity to broaden our horizons. So I think the main thing about moving forward would be to, you know, get our names, get us heard essentially, and try, you know, public events and attend some things where we can perhaps meet new people and network from there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're moving on to team 4 then, which in this case is Sam and Scarlett. Lovely.
Yeah, I've got my work on in the background, so I'm just hoping they don't notice I'm ignoring them.
Don't worry, I've got a vacuum going in the background, so think of that too. So,
sorry, I will also apologise. I'm at a rowing competition this weekend, so there may be some people running around the back of me. So apologies on my end as well.
The life of being online, right? Okay. Thank you. So you guys have had plenty of prep now for this question, but if you could do your kind of one-line hook for how you describe your project and how it answers the set question, that would be great. Thank you.
So what me and Sam really wanted to do was find a way to put people back into crisis response, because we've seen approaches that use numbers and statistics and things, but we thought that they forgot the sort of the social aspect, the more community-based reasons, and the sort of just the people involved in these like policy responses. And we chose to use sport as like a focal point, as a lens to like look at, to sort of approach this, because the infrastructure was there and it was like a good sort of linchpin for all these sort of communal issues that we needed and wanted to look at. And so we wanted to approach things in that way and take these 2 things to find a project that would help with crisis response and put sport and people back into the equation.
Great, thank you very much.
That was a nice strapline, Scarlett. Yeah, putting people back at the heart of things as well. It's really nice. So really interesting idea, and particularly from reading your report, and I liked the inclusion of your interviewees and their perspective on things, so that you could again kind of hear people's own voices around that. I wondered though, did you put the idea of kind of skilling coaches up in ethnographic methods and giving them ethnographic training? Did you put that idea to your interviewees, and if so, what did they make of it?
So I put this idea to, he didn't make it into the final edit, but my cricket coach, Terry Small, who is he coaches our team, but also coaches like Suffolk County Girls. And he was saying how, because I put it forward to him, I was like, is this the sort of thing, would you have time to do it? Would you like to do it? Because it wouldn't take much time in the way we would structure it, because we'd include it in current coaching courses. But he said it would be something really helpful, because it would help facilitate the role of coaches to perform their jobs even more, because it would give them better insight in understanding the sort of social dynamics within which they operate. So it's not just something which is like beneficial in the way we're looking at it. It would actually be beneficial to them as well, in the sort of, oh, it's not just helping crisis response, it's helping improve coaching in general. So it was something he was particularly keen on. And then I spoke to like Scott and that, and I didn't necessarily directly ask him, but he sort of addressed the issues of sort of social responsibilities of coaches. And it just sort of brought me straight back to Terry's response, who I'd spoken to earlier that morning, which is just this style of approach would just help that sort of like job and profession, and it would just enable better sort of communication and things in general of understanding people. So it's not just a case of, yeah, it's really helpful for us, but it's also helpful in the wider scheme of things.
And building on that point with the people I interviewed myself, I sort of learned quickly on that when I started off saying, oh, what do you think about use of ethnographic methodologies? They'd just go whoosh, shut down, do not know what's going on. And as much as we sort of critique academia and policy for operating in a vacuum and not having that space, sport is very much guilty of the same thing. So when we sort of went into the next two interviews, we sort of started rephrasing it and changing how we approached that to the coaches. And then when we started talking about, so are you listening to your athletes more? Are you listening to their problems more? Are you looking for their stress signals? And started phrasing about things and started talking about it in their language. They were much more keen to engage with it and say, yes, we do actually need more support in this area. And it's something that's been pinpointed consistently across all of them, was that they wanted more help in understanding their athletes and how they interact with society and how society interacts with their sport as well.
Thank you, Sam. That's really helpful. And that's very brave to have even used the word ethnography in an interview with a sports coach. So yeah, well done for that. But a big learning point there for you, I think.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
I don't think I've got any further questions, so thanks for that. It was really interesting.
Brilliant.
Great. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience or other participants to any of the teams? Because I can't see anything in the chat, so I don't think I missed any questions there. Otherwise, I'll give it a few more minutes, otherwise we can go on our break. I'm sure some would love to stretch the legs and possibly get something to eat. Gonna give people a few more seconds to possibly unmute themselves if that's what the problem is. Otherwise, I'm going to take that as a no. No other questions. We're all questioned out. Fantastic. Well, thank you to all the teams and all the judges and everyone watching. We will take a little break. The judges and I will deliberate in a separate venue, and we will see you back at 4:05. So we have an hour and 5 minutes. See you all soon.
See you all in a bit.
Right, welcome back everyone. I hope you had a nice break. We had a very productive break in the judges breakout room. But we did finish with a couple of minutes of margin at least, so we got some refreshments. I hope everyone is there. It's difficult to get a good overview, but it looks like everyone should be here. Right, the final. Just want to take the opportunity again to thank everyone involved. And I do apologize if I did leave someone out in my earlier thank you. But it's been a long day, but it's been a very interesting day, and fantastic to see your presentations. And I know how much work you put down in both your written proposals and the presentations, and you also did well during the Q&A. And well, I'm gonna hand you over to the convener of the judges, Professor Karen Gentry, who will, and I hope that Jenny has queued up the drum roll.
Yes, Jenny, should I give you a mark for a drum roll? Okay, I'll just go. I'll not keep everyone on tenterhooks much longer. We did, as a panel of judges, we really wanted to thank every team for their tremendous hard work, their effort, their dedication, and their creativity. We really enjoyed reading all 4 of the projects and viewing all 4 presentations. We thought your the answers to our questions were engaging and really helpful in clarifying some of the points that we had. And so again, we know that this took a lot of effort on everyone's part, and we're so impressed. And it's never easy to be the one to kind of hand over this decision. I feel like I'm on Bake Off or something. But so I'll start with 3rd prize, and that goes to Team 1. So congratulations to Team 1 for winning 3rd prize. And then in a somewhat unusual decision, we have decided that 1st prize will be shared between Team 2 and 3. We thought there was a lot of synergy between both teams, and that that one team kind of picked up where the other team perhaps left off. And so what we're looking forward to seeing develop over the next year or 2 is how you both work together and bringing your ideas forward. So again, congratulations to the teams, and again, thank you very much for your effort.
And now I'm back on. Thank you, Karen and Vicky and Dan for your hard work deciding. I'm sure it was difficult. I did ask you whether you to prepare some kind of statement or acceptance speech in a good old Oscar style. Let me know if you are happy to do so. Teams 2 and 3.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely.
I suppose a bit of a surprise to spring that on you, whether you would be happy to continue working on a joint project in this sense. But we will discuss the details in later on. Did you disappear again? Did see you.
We're back.
You're back. Nice to see faces.
Yeah, I guess we just have to thank all you guys for allowing the competition to go ahead. And like, I know our team's really grateful to Stephen for everything he did in supporting our project and kind of guiding us forward, and everyone we worked for. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, to jump in, I thought all the presentations were really nice, and like good work to everyone that was part of this long journey, but we made it in the end, and I think win or not win, it was an invaluable experience. So thank you to you guys as well.
Yeah, it definitely was a terrific project, and it's been so much fun working on it for the last 6 months. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity and for our team and for especially for Stephen. And we can't wait to work with Team 2 going forward.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No, also just from my perspective, thank you so much for the opportunity, especially as a first year, having their first year in the times of a global pandemic. It's been like great to like still be able to gain these skills and like have this global challenge still running, and yeah, to be able to participate was great, and now continuing to work on the project is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly what was said already. And yeah, I think what I learned from this personally is just that these are really hard problems to solve. So there isn't like probably one perfectly obvious way to do it. But yeah, we're happy to have made it so far, and yeah, we're excited to see what we can do with Team 2. Thank you to the judges and everyone. Yeah. And also our mentor, because he helped us quite a lot with especially setting up the website and just making sure we're on track. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I suppose that rounds it all off. Another year of the Global Challenges program. Thank you again to everyone involved, and we will be in touch.